All right, well, welcome everyone for this month's edition of Your Federation, where we are talking all things evaluations. We might exceed our 10-minute maximum that we try to strive for, just because we know this is a time of year when people are really excited to learn a little bit about what's happening and understand what's going on. And that is their goal today, is just to invite you in to learn a bit more about the process and see how it works. And again, we wish your athletes all the best in the weeks ahead. So for the agenda today, we're going to talk about our objectives. We're going to talk about who's who when it comes to evals for each of the age levels, talk briefly about UAAs and just how do they impact the process. Then what about U16 and U19? Quick comment about our goalies, then into our evaluators and eventually the role that coaches play. And last but not least, we'll just chat a bit about the realities of the process. So as far as objectives go, for me, it's all about this picture. What is this picture? It is a picture of the last time my twins played together. It's U10 step 3, because what would have happened next fall is one of the twins evaluated to U12B and one of the twins evaluated to U12C. And I must admit, as happy as the kids were that they got their own team, as parents, we were a little sad because we lost the luxury of one out-of-town tournament to go to, one practice to get to after work. We had it pretty good. Now we had to live like everyone else that has multiple children in multiple sports and teams. At the same token, while we were a little sad, we weren't frustrated because of this. We observed a very consistent, fair process being run by the association. It had an element of transparency, which is one of our goals here. It was impartial. It looked at skills. It looked at gameplay. While it didn't matter to us, certainly I would like to offer, we need a process that's very simple, straightforward, easy to execute. Many of us involved are volunteers, and volunteers can change year over year. So you need a process that people can pick up and run with, which is what we have. And it needs to be flexible and adaptable. We're evaluating all the way from the really young ages all the way up to our very oldest players and talented players all throughout the age groups all the way up to U19. So that's what we need. So to join us today, I am so happy. We've got our evaluations director, Aaron Lawson, who graciously stepped into the role this summer and has been working very hard to get everything rolling this year. I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Travis Drew and Alexis Snowden. They put in a ton of work last year, kind of hardening the foundation that we're building our process out on this year. And Aaron, welcome to the call. Can you just tell us a bit about who's who at the various age levels?
Hi, Gord. Yeah, so we can see from this chart, I organize a lot of the information that goes out to the division directors, but they are the face of the evaluation process. So they are your go-to people with any questions, and then they will come up to myself. And then throughout the process, when we are looking at team formation, team skates, everything like that, we do have an oversight committee for each of the age groups that we have, and everything will go to the oversight committees for final decisions going forward.
Now, Aaron and I are both U16 parents, so we are not on the oversight committee for U16. And that's important because a big part of our process is neutrality. So every oversight committee is comprised of people who have no athletes at that given age level to ensure we honor that process. So that's a key part of the oversight committee. How about UAAs, Aaron?
Yeah, so UAAs are a large part of how we form our skate groups and our teams. So the players all go through UAAs from the U10, 12s, and 14s. And then you can go to the Ring at Alberta website and watch the videos in regards to what those UAAs look like. So we use this as the foundation of our decisions as we move forward with our season. So as you can see, the U10s, the primary criteria that we use are the UAAs. We do use Competitive Thread, a third-party timing company, I guess. to do the UAAs. That way everybody is timed equally, and there's very minimal room for error. So at the U10 level, that is the primary measure that we used to evaluate. As we get into the higher age groups, U14, it's worth 40%. And then the 60% is their gameplay. So we're looking for game sense. And then at U14, the amount that we put on the UAA skill is 30%, and more goes into how the player actually plays on ice. When we get into the higher age groups, U16, 19, it is all on the scrimmage and gameplay. So that's how we look at, that's how we actually measure everything.
And then UAAs, just for everyone's awareness, those are also what govern what teams we are to form. It helps guide us on how many step 1 teams, 2 teams, all the way up to U14. It guides us. At 16, Ring at Alberta is just coming out with a more data-driven policy to help associations, well, I should say help direct associations on what level of teams they should form. And then U19, there is a policy they have for us. If we have 2 teams, 1A and 1B would be the mix at U19. Now, how about goalies? What do we do for that, Erin?
Yeah, so goalies, we actually have special sessions that are specific for goalies. And we do have our partners at 5 Count that actually run the evaluations for goalies. So again, a third-party evaluator that evaluates the goalies specifically. They are also evaluating during the gameplay as well. So we do have goalie evaluators to see how they're actually playing in the game. So a little bit more than just their skills in the net. We actually do have evaluators during the scrimmages as well at the U12 to U19 levels.
Right. And speaking of evaluators, I would also like to thank our many volunteer evaluators. So when you're watching the gameplay, you'll notice a group of volunteers with those clipboards, and we always ask you to give a bit of space so they can do their good work. How that process works is they each have a sheet with a certain number of players. We want many eyes on the athletes throughout all 3 skates to help us have a neutral, independent score for their skills and their gameplay. All evaluators cannot have an athlete in that age group. And as we get up to 16 and 19, we do also bring in paid evaluators, because we know as the age of the player goes up, it gets a little harder to see the differences in skills. So we also bring in some paid evaluators. And just to comment on evaluators, please offer them some grace, some empathy. It's a hard job, right? There's lots of kids skating out there. You're just looking for your best to see who's got that extra edge, who's maybe a little bit sharper with the ring, who's stabbing well, shooting well, checking well, you name it. We invite them to look for things like infractions and penalties, or taking way too long a shifts at the older ages when we don't buzz the shift changes anymore. So just, they are doing their best. They want what we all want, which is a fair observation of all the player skills to drive the process. And I promise you, they're doing their best, and they do have a tough role. Next up, our coaches. So what happens is our evaluators and at times the UAAs, that all gets mixed up, and the players are then ranked and placed into groupings. And how the process works is based on roster size. If, let's say, there's ABC at a given age level, a certain group at the top is automatically assigned to, let's say, the A team. And then the coach of that team is selected, and they are allowed to choose from something we call the bubble, which is the next group of players that is on the evaluators list. And those coaches can then look at things like, what position do they play, especially at the higher age levels, because they need to balance their roster of D, forwards, centers, etc. Sometimes they'll factor in last year's coaches' feedback. Many of our coaches know these athletes, so they know who's maybe driven hard to practice hard, etc. So our coaches also have a tough job at this point. been there before when you're looking at the list of all these amazing kids from amazing families and you only have so many spots on the roster you've been asked to choose. So just that's where our coaches pick up the process, all under the guidance of that oversight committee that Aaron spoke to earlier. And that's how the teams are formed. So I guess what I would offer is, this process is what we have and it's the best we have and we lean into it. I always like to say there is no perfect system for evaluations, because to have a perfect system, it would mean every player is exactly where they wanted to be. And we know this time of year, that's not always possible, right? And that's where I would just get into some of the realities of the process. When you're an athlete, and let's say you're in that bubble between B and C, well, if you desperately want to be on that B team for whatever reason, you want to challenge yourself, or maybe somebody else you know is on that team, we know how hard it can be if you might get the news that no, it's actually the C team we need you to be on. And it creates another opportunity, creates an opportunity to be a leader on a team from a skill standpoint, because if someone's in that bubble and they don't quite get if that's what they were hoping for, they get to go and do some amazing things at another level. And that's kind of our motto this time of year, is like everyone gets a team, and we always invite people to lean in and be excited with whatever that may be. So I guess I'd end with just good old empathy. Number one, empathize for our athletes. We know this is an anxious time of year, and by turn, we also empathize with our parents, because we know you care about all your athletes and you want what's best for them. And if you know they really want something, you want to see that happen. So that's who we empathize with first and foremost. Empathize for all our volunteers, whether it's the evaluators, the division directors, you name it. Everyone's doing their best to get this process done in the fair way that it's designed. And last but not least, I mentioned our coaches. Our coaches have a big part of this as well, and then they take things off into the rest of the season, some of our most involved volunteers. So just also a bit of empathy directed towards our coaches. So thank you very much for listening. As mentioned, it's the best system we have. This is not saying it's perfect. That doesn't exist. However, we are here to execute to the best of our abilities. So as mentioned, those are the individuals we want to encourage you to have empathy for, and we'll see you in the rinks. If you have any feedback, whether it's on this message or anything else going on around the association, don't hesitate to reach out, whether it's at my email or the many emails and contacts throughout the Federation. Everybody's here to make your experience the best possible. Have a great rest of the day. All the best with evaluations, and we'll see you around the rinks. Bye for now.